take a course. That's a formal pursuit. For example, you can go to our Rayyan courses on whitethread.org and take at least the Islamic Essentials course. I would suggest everybody take that. If you, unless you're a scholar, unless you've taken other advanced courses, basically at least go and study the Islamic Essentials certificate on Rayyan courses. What that is essentially 20 short modules, very short ones, one on fiqh, one on hadith, one on tafsir, one on the basics of aqidah, and so on and so forth. What you get from that is just a basic understanding. So I get calls from people, so I get a first call about a certain really fundamental issue, and then I get another call. Eventually when I get the second or third call, I tell them, I said, you, mashallah, have curiosity, but you have no foundation. That's why you're asking some of these really basic things that anybody who's been to a decent maktab should even know. So I'm not going to answer your questions anymore. Go and take this course. Because it's so fundamental that you need to take a course so that all of these things just become clearer in your mind. When you don't have a resolve, then it's very difficult. For example, I was looking for insulation. Right? Just a worldly example. Looking for insulation. And you don't know that it's a minefield out there just understanding insulation. Right? So I had to insulate the joists under the floorboards. Which one do I use? I talked to 4 or 5 different people. I checked online and so on. So I'm getting different opinions. Oh, you can just use the loft roll. So that was very cheap. I was just going to go and buy that. Then I called another, goes, no, you can't use the loft roll. That's for lofts. You have to get this particular slabs of insulation, this particular rock wool. Allahu Akbar. So why can't I use that? That's cowboy job. You have to use this one. Then I called this other company. I said, you don't need to use that. That's just an overkill. You can just get a loft roll again. La ilaha illallah. Then I figured out that they have different insulation for the loft. They have different insulation for the walls and cavity walls. Some are to do more for insulation. Some are more for soundproofing. Some are more for thermal benefit, the heat. And then you have those which are in the joists. And then of course that's just in terms of cavity stuff. Then you have further other, ya Allah, the world has become very complicated. So ultimately, if I have no idea, I'm clueless. Imagine you're clueless about the faith. You just got into it. There are people like that. They've just started practicing. They're clueless. Which insulation shall I use? So you're going to need somebody. The best teacher you can have is... So then when I told what the second person said to the third person, he said, yeah, he's just going by regulations. But that's just too expensive. It's not worth it. They just make regulations to make sure that they are just covering their backs. So he's telling you what the regulations say, but you don't have to go with that. Then eventually I had to use my own mind. And I said, okay, those PIR ones, which are the very hard ones, that's going to take too long to put those on. Because they make a lot of mess and you have to cut them and they cost a lot more as well. And then you have to make sure that they are done very well and there's no gaps in between. I'm not going to use the loft roll. That's maybe too much of a cheap option. I'll use the middle option, which is the proper option, but it's not an overkill. And it's a bit easier to do because I don't have time. Eventually, you're going to have to make a decision on these things. But if you can have access to a scholar or to teaching or learning. Now, if I went for a 1-hour seminar on insulation, I wouldn't have a problem. Because I would have understood everything. I wouldn't be confused. Do I buy this one? Do I buy this one? And waste 2 hours trying to figure it out myself. This is in everything. Most people don't bother. They just call a builder and say, you do it. He shoves in whatever he wants. And then you have a problem later if he hasn't done a good job. Then it just depends on how good or bad they are. Our deen can't be left like that. We need to understand our deen, at least the basics. At least the basics. Then there's going to be a level of understanding in terms of insulation on some very high level. That's not my job, right? But the basics of the deen have to be understood. Allah make it easy. Allah make it easy. The world is very complicated. But the deen is not that complicated. It's just that we haven't bothered even finding out.
With the Rayan Courses subscription, you'll gain immediate access to over 250 hours of exclusive video lessons taught by experienced scholars. Sign up now at rayancourses.com to continue your journey. Your next lesson is waiting.